April 15, 1982. Johnny Carson was mid-interview with Tony Curtis when the Hollywood legend suddenly stopped talking, grabbed his chest, and collapsed. The cameras kept rolling. 20 million people watched it happen live. What Johnny did in the next 90 seconds didn't just save a life. It revealed who the king of late night really was when the lights went out and the script disappeared. The show had been perfect up until that moment. Tony Curtis, the 57-year-old star of Some Like It Hot, the man who'd kissed Marilyn Monroe and fought as Spartacus, was telling stories only Hollywood legends can tell. The audience was eating it up. Johnny was laughing, leaning back in his chair doing what he did better than anyone, making great television look effortless. 8 minutes in, everything changed. Tony was mid-sentence, hands gesturing wildly as he told a story about Billy Wilder when he just stopped. His face, flushed with laughter a second before, went ghost white. His hand moved to his chest. "Tony?" Johnny said, leaning forward. "You okay?" Curtis didn't answer. He blinked hard, like he was trying to clear fog from his vision. The audience thought it was part of the bit. They stayed quiet, waiting for the punchline. "Johnny," Curtis finally said, his voice thin and strained, "I don't feel..." And then he collapsed. His body went limp, his head dropped forward. 20 million people held their breath. Before we go any further, if you're here because you remember nights like this, when television felt real, when anything could happen, subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories. We're uncovering the moments that showed Johnny wasn't just an entertainer. He was the man you'd want next to you when everything went wrong. Hit that bell so you never miss these stories. For most people, what happened next would have been chaos. The cameras were live. A Hollywood icon was dying on national television. Panic would have been understandable. Freezing would have been natural. Johnny Carson did neither. He stood up immediately, moved to Curtis. No hesitation, no second guessing. "We need a doctor," Johnny called out, his voice cutting through the stunned silence like a command. "Is there a doctor in the audience?" But he didn't wait for an answer. While everyone else was still processing what was happening, Johnny was already moving Curtis out of the chair and onto the floor. Carefully, controlled, like he'd done this 1,000 times. The audience finally understood. This wasn't a bit. This was real. "Tony," Johnny said, leaning close to Curtis's face. "Tony, can you hear me?" Curtis's eyes were half open, but there was nothing behind them. No response. Johnny put his ear to Curtis's mouth, watched his chest. Curtis was breathing. Barely, shallow, labored. Then Johnny did something that shocked the paramedics who'd review the footage later. He loosened Curtis's collar and tie, giving him room to breathe. Then he grabbed the guest chair, pulled it close, and elevated Curtis's legs onto it. That position, flat on his back, legs elevated, was exactly what Curtis needed. It kept blood flowing to his brain and vital organs. It's what kept him alive. "Call 911 now," Johnny said to his stage manager, who was already running. Then he turned to Ed McMahon. "Ed, get the audience back. Give us some room." Ed moved quickly, ushering the front rows back, creating a perimeter around Johnny and Tony. Doc Severinsen, the bandleader, stood frozen at his podium, trumpet still in hand. The entire studio had gone silent except for Johnny's voice, calm, controlled, in command. What happened next wasn't just crisis management. It was a masterclass in leadership. Johnny kept one hand on Curtis's shoulder, monitoring his breathing, his consciousness, while addressing 20 million viewers with a calm that felt almost impossible given the circumstances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Johnny said, looking directly into the camera, "we're dealing with a medical emergency here. Help is on the way. Tony is breathing, and we're taking care of him. We're going to take a break while we get him the help he needs." No panic, no drama, just clear, calm information delivered with authority. It did something critical. It kept everyone, in the studio, at home, from panicking. The camera operators later said they'd never seen anything like it. One of them, a 20-year veteran named Mike Sullivan, told reporters the next day, "I've covered fires, accidents, breaking news. But watching Johnny Carson handle that crisis with Tony Curtis, that was the most professional thing I've ever witnessed. He was calmer than most doctors I've seen in emergencies." Fred de Cordova cut to commercial, but the cameras kept recording. That footage would later be used by emergency response trainers across the country as an example of how to handle a crisis. Johnny Carson had done everything right. Within 3 minutes, though it felt like hours, paramedics arrived. They'd been stationed nearby, standard NBC protocol, but even they were impressed by what they found. Tony Curtis was already stabilized, airway clear, blood flow maintained. Every decision Johnny had made in those 90 seconds had been exactly correct. One of the paramedics, a veteran EMT named Robert Chen, knelt down next to Johnny. "Sir, what did you do?" "Loosened his airway, elevated his legs, kept him flat," Johnny said, not taking his eyes off Curtis. "He's breathing, but it's shallow. Pulse is weak." Chen looked at his partner, then back at Johnny. "You just described a textbook response to cardiac distress. Are you trained?" "Navy, and I've kept up with it." Curtis was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. The diagnosis, a minor heart attack. What doctors call a warning event. Serious, but manageable if handled properly. If handled improperly, it's fatal. The next day, Dr. Michael Richardson, Curtis's cardiologist, held a press conference that made headlines nationwide. "Mr. Curtis is stable and expected to make a full recovery," Dr. Richardson said. "But I want to be very clear about something. If Johnny Carson hadn't responded exactly the way he did, keeping the airway clear, elevating the legs to maintain blood flow, immediately calling for help, we would be having a very different conversation right now." Translation: Johnny Carson saved Tony Curtis's life. A reporter in the back raised his hand. "Dr. Richardson, can you elaborate on what Mr. Carson did that was so crucial?" The doctor nodded. "When someone experiences cardiac distress, every second matters. Mr. Carson recognized the symptoms immediately: the pallor, the chest pain, the loss of consciousness. He acted within seconds, not minutes. He positioned Mr. Curtis correctly to maximize blood flow to the brain. He kept the airway open. He didn't try to give him water or move him unnecessarily. Everything he did was textbook perfect. In my 30 years as a cardiologist, I can tell you that most bystanders panic or freeze. Mr. Carson did neither." If you're feeling the weight of what almost happened that night, you're exactly where we want you. That's what Johnny Carson Legacy Stories is about, showing you the moments when Johnny stopped being a performer and became a hero. Subscribe now and join thousands who are rediscovering why Johnny wasn't just the king of late night. He was the man who showed up when it mattered most. 3 weeks later, Tony Curtis walked back onto the Tonight Show stage. This time, he wasn't there to promote a movie or tell Hollywood stories. He was there to say thank you to the man who'd saved his life. The audience gave him a standing ovation before he even sat down. Johnny stood, hugged his friend, and for a moment, neither man could speak. "You know, Johnny," Curtis finally said, settling into the guest chair, "I've done some dangerous things in my career. Fought gladiators, hung from buildings, all kinds of crazy stunts. But waking up in a hospital and being told I collapsed on your show, that was the scariest moment of my life." "The scary part for me," Johnny replied, "was watching you go down and thinking we might lose you right there. I'm just glad I remembered those Navy first aid courses." Curtis shook his head. "The doctors told me what you did wasn't just first aid, Johnny. You made decisions in seconds that would take medical training to understand. Elevating my legs kept blood flowing to my brain. Loosening my collar helped me breathe. Every single thing you did was exactly right." The audience applauded, but Curtis raised his hand. "No, I'm serious. The cardiologist told me that most people in that situation, even trained people, make at least one mistake under pressure, moving the person too much, giving them water, trying to sit them up. Any of those things could have made it worse. Johnny made 0 mistakes." "I was terrified," Johnny admitted quietly. "I just tried to remember what I'd learned." What came out during that interview surprised viewers who thought they knew Johnny Carson. After his Navy service in World War II, Johnny had continued taking emergency response training. Year after year, he'd quietly kept his certification current. Most people didn't know. Johnny never mentioned it. "I always thought that if something went wrong on my show," Johnny explained, "if someone got hurt or sick, I wanted to be able to help. I didn't want to just stand there." Curtis leaned forward. "That's what makes you different, Johnny. Most people in your position would have had a dozen assistants rush in. You would have been expected to step back, let the professionals handle it. But you didn't. You were the professional." That mindset, being prepared for something you hope never happens, saved Tony Curtis's life. The conversation turned to what Curtis remembered from that night. He remembered telling the Billy Wilder story. He remembered the sudden pain in his chest, like someone was squeezing his heart. He remembered thinking, "This is it. I'm going to die on The Tonight Show." "But then I heard your voice," Curtis said, his own voice breaking slightly. "I heard you say my name. 'Tony, can you hear me?' And I knew if anyone could get me through it, it was you." Johnny wiped his eyes. "I'm just glad you're here, Tony. That's all that matters." The ripple effects of that night went far beyond The Tonight Show. NBC immediately upgraded its emergency medical protocols. Every soundstage now had an EMT on site during live tapings. Other networks followed. Within months, every major television production had medical personnel on site during live broadcasts. The change happened fast because NBC's Vice President of Operations, Susan Martinez, had been in the audience that night. She'd watched the entire crisis unfold from the second row. "I saw how close we came to losing Tony Curtis on live television," she told the network's board of directors. "If Johnny hadn't known what to do, we would have had a tragedy. We can't rely on luck like that again." Emergency response training programs started using the footage from that night as a teaching tool. Not just what Johnny did, but how he did it. Calm, controlled, authoritative, leadership under pressure. The American Red Cross reached out to Johnny, asking him to appear in public service announcements promoting first aid training. Johnny agreed immediately. "If what happened on my show convinces even one person to learn these skills," he said, "then something good came out of something terrifying." The PSAs aired for 2 years. In them, Johnny didn't talk about saving Tony Curtis. He talked about why everyone should know basic first aid. "You never think it's going to be you," Johnny said in one of the spots. "You never think you'll be the one who has to act, but someday, someone you love might need help, and you'll be the only one there. Learn what to do. Be ready." The Red Cross reported a 30% increase in first aid course enrollment in the year following those PSAs. Tony Curtis spent the rest of his life talking about that night. In interviews, at events, in his autobiography, he never let people forget what Johnny had done. "Johnny Carson saved my life," Curtis wrote, "but more than that, he showed me what it means to be prepared. He could have panicked, he could have waited for someone else to step in. Instead, he acted with skill and compassion. I'm here because of him." Curtis made changes after the heart attack, quit smoking, changed his diet, started exercising, became an advocate for heart health. He lived another 28 years, passing away peacefully in 2010 at 85. "Johnny gave me those years," Curtis said in one of his final interviews. "Every birthday, every holiday, every moment with my family. I got all of that because Johnny Carson knew what to do when I needed help most." Curtis had 4 more children after 1982. He saw his grandchildren grow up. He made a dozen more films. He painted, an interest he'd always had but never pursued seriously. He traveled, he lived, all of it because Johnny Carson had taken first aid courses he hoped he'd never need. Here's what that night revealed about Johnny Carson. He wasn't just a performer who happened to be good in a crisis. He was someone who'd spent years preparing for a moment he hoped would never come. Most of us go through life assuming someone else will handle the emergency, that when things go wrong, a professional will appear, that we won't be the ones who have to act. Johnny Carson thought differently. He took courses, renewed certifications, kept skills sharp even though he was one of the most famous people on the planet and had staff to handle everything. Because Johnny understood something fundamental. When someone collapses in front of you, there is no someone else. There's only you and what you know in that moment. The Navy had taught him that in 1943. He was 18 years old, assigned to the USS Pennsylvania during World War II. He'd seen men injured, seen chaos, seen what happened when people panicked versus when people stayed calm. "The Navy taught me that preparation isn't optional," Johnny said in a rare interview about his military service. "It's the difference between life and death." He carried that lesson into civilian life. While other celebrities collected cars or art, Johnny collected certifications, first aid, CPR, water safety, even wilderness survival, though. He rarely left Los Angeles. "You never know," was his philosophy. And on April 15, 1982, that philosophy saved a life. Years later, when asked about the scariest moment of his Tonight Show career, Johnny always mentioned Tony Curtis. "People tune in to laugh," Johnny said. They don't expect their host to be dealing with a medical emergency, but life doesn't stop because the cameras are rolling. I'm just grateful I was able to help a friend when he needed it. That's vintage Johnny, downplaying his own heroism, deflecting credit, making it sound like anyone would have done the same. But anyone wouldn't have. And didn't. Johnny did. Today, emergency response trainers still show footage of Johnny Carson's response to Tony Curtis's collapse. It's used in courses across the country as an example of perfect crisis management. What makes it perfect isn't just that Johnny knew first aid, it's that he stayed calm. He led, he acted decisively while everyone else froze. Those 90 seconds showed America something they'd never seen before. Johnny Carson, without the jokes, without the charm, without the performance. Just a man doing what needed to be done because he was the only one who could. Medical professionals who've analyzed the footage say the same thing Dr. Richardson said in 1982. Without Johnny's response, Tony Curtis would have died on that stage. The footage has been studied in medical schools, shown at emergency management conferences, used in corporate training seminars. It's become the gold standard for how to handle a medical emergency as a bystander. Johnny Carson entertained millions of people over 30 years. He created moments that defined American television. But the 90 seconds he spent saving Tony Curtis's life might have been his most important performance, not because it was entertaining, but because it was real. Johnny Carson died in 2005, but what he did that April night in 1982 still echoes. It reminds us that heroes aren't always the people in uniforms. Sometimes they're the person sitting next to you who took a first aid course years ago and hoped they'd never need it. It reminds us that being prepared isn't paranoid, it's responsible. And it reminds us that when everything goes wrong, calm leadership can mean the difference between tragedy and survival. If this story moved you, if it made you think about your own preparedness, your own ability to help when someone needs it, do something about it. Take a first aid course, learn SEEP, be the person who knows what to do when everyone else freezes, and subscribe to Johnny Carson Legacy Stories for more untold moments that reveal the man behind the legend. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling us about a time someone's quick thinking made all the difference. Because in the end, we're all just one moment away from needing help, or being the one who provides it. Johnny Carson understood that, and on April 15, 1982, 20 million people watched him prove it. Tony Curtis got 28 more years because Johnny was ready. Be ready.